Well, welcome back. Today, I like to talk about and expand on an offline conversation that I had earlier. I had the topic for today, but in many ways, sometimes an offline conversation that you might have had with a friend, a loved one, some casual acquaintances often appear to be more interesting than a topic you had in mind to share. And such is the case this evening. Earlier today, I and the missus, we had an errand to run. And we decided that it would be easier to walk down my street, our street, and pick up one of these rental cars. You subscribe to a network and you have access to a fleet of cars. We needed roughly about 30 minutes to run the errand. So we scheduled a 1 hour slot. It cost us £10, so technically £5 per half hour. And we were certainly confident that we could have done and completed the errand within a half hour slot, but we booked for 1 hour just in case. We picked up the car. It was a brand new, very, very, very good, very comfortable car, and we drove. It was a 2022 or 2021 model. Fairly new, sophisticated. It had all of the gadgets, quite impressive. Now, while I was driving, it occurred to me, and hence the conversation that we are having now, that technology has changed in such a way that certain things that we once used to have that cost a lot of money are like commodities today. The cost curves are declining very, very, very rapidly. People are paying a lot less for such services, and as a result of that, you can obtain and have the experience which previously may have cost you a fortune. You can have that experience for peanuts. Now, I have a number of friends and a few people I know who have cars, but generally in the UK, the average person who owns a car uses the car no more than about 5% on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis. The average cost of owning a car in terms of maintenance ranges from between £100 up to about £250, and this is on average. If we were to use the lowest range, which is £100 per month, and that would cover your insurance, your maintenance, your service checkup, and petrol. And we say that's what you spend for the whole month. That £100 would be a significant sum to spend, especially considering the utilization factor. So if it costs you £100 for 100% utilization of the car, then that would be fair. However, if there is a 5% utilization factor, then it means in principle, although you're spending £100, all things remaining equal, it would mean that that car is costing you 20 times that £100 because of the low utilization of the car. So what should have been £100 a month, if you judged based on the utilization of the car, you're looking at roughly £2,000 per month for the ownership of that car. That is an expense most people happily have. And so the contrast I had was the fact that I needed a car for half an hour, I paid for an hour, and it cost me £10. So if I needed to use a car twice every week for 1 hour each time, it would cost me £20. If you compare that £20 against £2,000 in terms of utilization, you could see that full ownership and rental are two different possible approaches to how you can have a need met. After all, the car is there for a reason, to take you from point A to point B. Now, a long way of going about today's conversation, and I hope you bear with me. Today's conversation is about the fact that sex is a commodity, just in the same way that what we call transport as a service, Uber, the likes of Didi, Lyft, and this is extending to those who are providing a different type of service offering, where you can rent a car by the minute or rent a car by the hour. That service has become quite attractive, and as a result there are people who believe that it is much easier to rent than to own. Now, the average person in the UK, although they have a car, the average age of a car owned by an individual in the UK is roughly about 10 years. So technically, most people are driving cars that are at least 10 years old. They're paying a hefty fine in terms of expenses that they have to pay every single month and every single year. Now, if you compare that against someone who decides to simply use the service when they need it, to have a driver arrive at their doorstep, pick them up when they want, and take them to where they want to with no expenses, then what you then have is a model which can be applied to dating and to the sexual marketplace. You've heard me say before that there are two marketplaces. There is the dating marketplace and there is the marriage marketplace. The dating marketplace has a set of requirements that are slightly different than the marriage marketplace. But generally speaking, men today, modern men, are starting to question whether they need to go as far as the marriage marketplace. Is it not possible to remain in the dating marketplace because you can obtain the benefits of those in the marriage marketplace without paying the cost? So we'll put it back into the analogy of cars. Ownership and rental. Two options. You can own the car or you can rent the car. Now, those two options are open to most young men today, and more, both mature men and younger men are coming to the acceptance that it is much easier to rent than it is to own. Now, I should clarify that I'm not talking about owning women, because slavery was abolished many years ago, but I'm referring to the idea of actually being in a committed relationship where you actually bear both the capital expenditure and the operating expenditure of that relationship, versus a scenario where you have no capital expenditure, no operating expenditure, but simply a token payment when you want a service to be met. Again, you've heard me say that sex is war, and that all is fair in love and sex. Generally, the way this works, or the way this plays itself out in the dating marketplace and in the sexual and in the marriage marketplace, is that men want as much variety of sexual partners as they can get, not as they can afford, as they can get. They want quality, they want quantity, but they lean more towards quantity because we want variety. But we want all of that experience at the same time as we give up the least amount of resources possible. In other words, we want an unequal exchange. Women, on the other hand, play a different game to the men. They recognize that men want sex, and so it's a woman's best interest, and it's in a woman's best interest to obtain the most amount of resources and give up the least amount of sex. She can have as many partners as she wants, but genuinely speaking, the idea is to minimize becoming a village bicycle, minimize the risk of having too many people take advantage and give you nothing in return. Now, whoever plays that game the best wins, which is why we say all is fair in love and sex, and that sex is war. Now, that is one part of how this whole process begins in the dating marketplace. Men take it a step further in that they want to have the most attractive women, the most easy to access women sexually, but they also want simultaneously for such a woman, or for those women, to have very, very little demands in relation to resources and little demands in relation to time, attention. They want those women to come with very little baggage, and they hope those women will not be the gold diggers. For every man, I should rephrase that, for men in general, that is the Goldilocks. We get the most amount of sexual partners with the hottest women out there, and those women generally do not want a lot of resources. What that means is that we have to play the game regularly, which means we're exposing ourselves to the probability and the possibility of finding such a woman, which usually is very hard to obtain. In any case, a man's ability to play effectively such a game is intrinsically connected to his status in society: money, power, fame, influence, connection, and wealth. The younger the man is, the harder it is for him to attract the best quality and the most attractive women, because such women generally want men who are established and who can bring to the table what they want, which is access to power, access to influence, access to wealth, access to resources, access to money. So, part of what I try to share is that intrinsically in every man is a need to be appreciated by a woman, to be lauded by a woman, to be celebrated, to be esteemed by a woman. And so we would do anything, even when we do not have the ability to create such a resource stream. We will sell our personal effects, we will steal, we will borrow money, simply because we really want sex. And so what I try to teach, what I try to share with young men is, we in society today, both sexes, we have the longest and the highest life expectancy in history. The average man will live in the developed West, and for example in the UK, has a life expectancy of roughly 85%, between 82 and 85%. That is the highest it's ever been. Back in the day, before the 1940s, people got married at age 25, because the expectancy of life at that time was roughly in the 40s, especially if you go back to the 19th century and the 18th century, it was much less. So if you got married at 25, at best you had 20 years to live. And if you were lucky, you had a good spouse and a good life, you led a good life. And today people live until 85. Therefore, it's important for men to slow down the process. There is no rush to get married. Back in the day, you got married because you needed access for sex. You needed sex, and the only way you could have that need met was to be married. Today, you can have as much sex as you want because sex is now a commodity. It's a race to the bottom. For less than £1, if I want to have sex with someone who's extremely attractive today, all I have to do is walk down the street or swipe left or right. It's that cheap, it's that easy. People have sex today before they go on dates and before they get to know the person. They simply have a need, both parties have a need, and they meet, and that need is fulfilled. Therefore, people do not have to get married as eagerly as we used to in the past. But more importantly, I say to young men between 18 and 35, you have 18 years, the most important years of your life. And in those years, you can sow the seeds of greatness, the seeds of wealth, the seeds of influence. You could actually sow the right seeds that enable you to make a dent on the universe. 18 short years, or long years, depending on who you are. And in those periods, in that period, you will be tempted to give up on that dream, on that goal, that ambition, that vision. And primarily the reason people do so is because a woman is involved, in the case of a man, or in the case of a woman, a man is involved. Relationships will kill your dreams. Therefore, the overarching message I try to share is, don't make that decision too early. You can wait. You can afford to wait. Do not consider marriage until at least age 30, and do not get married until age 35. That is my view. In the interim, between 18 and 35, those needs you have to be met. And this is where I connect today's conversation with the cars and the analogy of cars. And my view is simply, the younger you are, especially if you're between 18 and 35, you should be renting rather than owning a car. Put it differently, why rent a car, or rather, why own a used car when you can afford to rent a new, better improved model of a car? So rather than be forced into marriage very young, or rather than be forced into marriage at a much older age, why not rent? Because you can get the same benefits, and the experience might be even more exciting from the rental process rather than from the ownership process. The main reason you do the rental approach is simply because you can avoid what we call the fixed costs that come with ownership. First of all, in order to buy anything, you have what we call the capital expenditure, the money needed to actually purchase that item. Once you purchase that item, in this case, let's use a car, you now need money to meet all of the operating expenses that ownership brings. So you need money for buying the gas, taking it for services, making sure it's well maintained, insuring the car. Two costs: operating cost, which comes from the ownership, and capital cost, which comes from buying or becoming the owner of the item. When you rent, on the other hand, like I did today, for £10 I had full access to the same rights anyone who had a similar car had. I could take the car wherever I wanted to. As a matter of fact, I drove the car and I actually bought no fuel. Included in that £10 was my insurance, the maintenance of the car, and the fuel required to take me from point A to point B and bring me back to point A. And so I gained all of the benefits. And at the end of the 1 hour period, I dropped the car off, I walked away with no responsibility. Between 18 and 35, That is the mindset most young men should have in regards to dating. You do not want to be in a mono relationship. You do not want to be in a relationship. You want to be dating, but dating for men is the same as sex. You want to have as many plates spinning as you can, for the reason being 95% of your time and attention and focus, commitment should be directed towards your future, your goals, your dreams, becoming your best self, trying to understand your purpose, and creating some wealth for you and your loved ones. 5% should be dedicated towards what I call play, chasing tail. Now, this 5% is equal to what I started today's conversation with, which was a 5% utilization for most cars. Now, if all you're giving is 5% for relationships and chasing tail, then it means your utilization is so low, you do not have to incur the cost of paying for dates every day, paying for expenses for holidays, paying for rent for the girlfriend, sharing the rent with the girlfriend, and all the other expenses that come with ownership. Now, women are not owned, I understand, but I can tell you this: relationships are not free. There's a price to pay. The currency of exchange varies. For some people it's affection, for some it's intimacy, for some it's financial means, for others it could be something else, but you will pay. There is a currency that is consistent as a common denominator across all of those currencies, and that is time. You pay with time. Sometimes you pay with time and money, and sometimes you pay with time and deeds, but you will pay with your time. Therefore, between 18 and 35, my view is minimize your cost. Take all of that time and resources and invest those into stocks, bonds, invest those in properties, invest those in alternative assets, so that it compounds. So that when you turn 35, at that point in time, you have the wealth, you have the resources. You can then decide if you want to purchase a car to your taste and to your liking. And who knows, it could be an Aston Martin you decide you want to own. It could be a Rolls Royce you decide to own. But one thing will be sure, you will be making a choice based on the need you have and based on the ability to meet that need financially. Now, I hope that's been useful.